Welcome, everyone. We are so excited you're joining us today for round 2 of our Ready to Talk conversations. If this is your first time joining us, this is one space where we hope to share more about Mercy Housing's racial equity, diversity, and inclusion work, also known as REDI. And joining me today for this very important conversation are Sol Dansie and Nadia Ali. Welcome, ladies. Before we jump into this conversation, let me introduce myself and say a few words about who we are here at Mercy Housing. My name is Jennifer Thibault, and I am Vice President of Operations here in Colorado, which simply means for this region, I get to work closely with resident services and philanthropy. Mercy Housing is one of the largest nonprofit affordable housing providers in the U.S., owning, operating, and managing nearly 350 communities across 20 states and serving approximately 25,000 residents. We believe that housing stability and a place to call home is the most vital need in our community, and it is just the beginning. We also offer resident services, which are free of charge, wraparound services to support residents' access to financial capability, community engagement, youth and adult education, as well as health and wellness. And over the last few years, we have taken a deep dive into racial equity work. So without further delay, let's jump into that conversation, shall we? Maya, Sol, and Nadia, thank you both so much for joining us today. To get us started, can you each take a couple of minutes and tell us a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds, both personal and professional?
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'll get us started. Hello, everyone. My name is Maya Sol. I use she, her, ella, la pronouns, and I am a first-generation Mexica mujer, Spanish-speaking, born in Boulder, Colorado. I am a daughter of immigrant parents from Mexico and daughter of activist parents who currently have a nonprofit here in Boulder County. And first and foremost, before we jump in, I'd like us to acknowledge the ancestors and original peoples of this land. We are calling from and zooming in from the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho territories. And so wherever any folks may be joining us, just to take a quick moment and acknowledge our original guardians and protectors of this land. And our sacred elements, the earth, the fire, the water, the wind, and to get us started. My background is mostly in public health. I directed a reproductive justice program for the last 12 years. I have a social work background as well and a therapeutic psychotherapy clinical lens, but really looking at deconstructing and decolonizing our mental health and our wellness. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, for having us here today. My name is Nadia. And I'm also the daughter of immigrants. My parents immigrated to the United States from Pakistan in the late 1970s. And I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey and now live with my husband and 2 children in Boulder, Colorado. My background is also in public health as well as nonprofit management. And I have over 20 years of experience working in a variety of settings. And I've worked deeply with communities of color and immigrant populations to help amplify their voices and build capacity and leadership. And now have the privilege of doing that through my consulting firm, Idea Labs.
What an amazing background that you both shared. And to hear that you both have a public health background, I wonder what led you to the work that you're doing now?
So as I mentioned, being firstborn in Boulder out of all places, coming from a background of Guadalajara, Mexico, I experienced a significant gap in things as far as representation, services, access to things that were relevant to me and my identity. And growing up in this kind of search for identity formation, the cultural implications of that were pretty significant. And so not only was I well aware of the gaps in services, but I also had a hypervigilance to what safety meant. Being in a mixed immigrant status family, even if services were available, they weren't necessarily accessible for me or my family. And as I continued to grow up in the systems of Boulder County and much across dominant United States, I got the sense that I wasn't alone and feeling othered and not quite included or seen from things in leadership, decision-making positions, politics, and therapeutic interventions. And so having the burden of responsibility that many of us first generation folks do of making the sacrifices of our parents worth it, I saw it really be a sense of my purpose and identity to continue the work that my parents were doing and to do whatever I could to fill in the gaps of those pieces. As I mentioned, my parents are organizers and activists. And so growing up with that tenet and value that it was a responsibility. And my response to that was My Emotion Healing, which is my small business. And My Emotion Healing is a comprehensive response to the most pressing social justice, mental health, and community issues that we face today. I offer 3 levels of services, including individual and family therapy, somatic dance movement and therapy, specifically for survivors of sexual assault, and also community movement building. So looking at systems and disrupting systems of oppression and creating new ways to leverage and center our communities of color.
And in terms of what drew me to this line of work, just to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in a town right outside of Princeton, New Jersey, and it looked like a blueprint of what I thought all of America looks like. I also grew up speaking different languages and with friends from a variety of cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds. And I had the privilege of traveling around the world with my family and being immersed in a variety of cultures. And so I thought everywhere was culturally diverse until I realized it wasn't, especially moving out to Boulder, Colorado 6 years ago. I've always valued diversity and inclusivity from a young age and have been really intrigued by how inequities play out in society, whether it's on a playground or at a hospital. I've also been on the receiving end of bullying and racism and have seen a variety of inequities just play out over and over throughout my life. And one inequity that really stays with me is when I was young and my grandmother became ill and had to be hospitalized. And at the time, there were really no systems in place for people who had language barriers. And so I really started to think a lot about, how can we be better? How can we be kinder? How can we improve our current systems? And through Idea Labs, I have the opportunity to work in partnership with organizations to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion across the workplace and communities at large.
Well, it sounds like your paths were destined to cross at some point, given your backgrounds that are very similar. I wonder, how did you guys decide to work together? Like, when did that story begin?
So we met last year during the pandemic through a business accelerator program we participated in that helps to support the launch and growth of our businesses. The program was virtual due to COVID, and every time we would have small group work or breakout groups, it was our luck that we would be in the same group. And as we started to learn more about one another, our interests and experiences around being bicultural and bilingual, it was only natural that we find ways to collaborate.
What a lovely story. It's like you guys are supposed to be friends, right? Which brings me to this question. You refer to yourselves as a radical partnership. Why radical? What does that mean to you guys? I'm excited for this question, so I can't wait to hear where it goes.
I'm excited too. I get excited about this question. And really what's fascinating is to think about what does it mean to be radical in today's political climate and our economic, just so many systems that are impacting what it means to be radical. And both of our small businesses aim to promote connection, awareness, and to challenge current structures that are in place to create change. Due to the nature of the work, we engage in courageous dialogue and conversations, especially when it comes to race and racialized conversations and naming whiteness and naming white supremacy and naming folks that have contributed to this work that have been considered radical in the past historically or even in modern day narratives. And so really speaking truth to power, challenging the status quo, disrupting oppression, and coming from a sense of creating and imagining something that has never been built, which is equity. I mean, we can aim for equity, but to see that to be the ways in which we operate across our lives would be considered radical because it hasn't yet existed on the foundation of this country historically. How the fabrics of America of the US and what that represents. And I think because Nadia and I both come from a bicultural immigrant and historical context, we're informed by this reality consistently. And so to me, and I'm sure if you ask Nadia the same, it doesn't feel so radical. What's radical about speaking some palabra, some truth? But I do see how it can be perceived because it is challenging and it's brave work. And it's collaborative and rooted also in looking at how we can enjoy what we do and not feel burnt out, consumed, or fatigued and defeated day to day. And so to find even, dare I say, enjoyment and pleasure in what we're doing is potentially radical. And I love, the collaboration with Nadia, is a couple breakouts here and there from our cohort, but we would find every excuse to collaborate because we weren't only focused on the work, but we would check in on each other, and we still do. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What do you have for yourself in soul care today and this weekend? That type of accountability too, I would say maybe is radical. And then we go into the work.
Wow. As I sit here and think about how challenging this work is, to hear you say being brave is one of those traits that we need to have. I'd like to switch gears because I feel like moving into the work that you guys are doing with Mercy Housing is also being brave, right? So can you share with us kind of the work that you are doing in the Mercy Housing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion space? And then what kind of drew you to that collaboration?
Sure. So the work that we are doing with Mercy Housing and the REDI project is so exciting. We are creating an age-appropriate, culturally grounded curriculum for youth that will support them in the exploration of their identities, give them a deeper understanding of concepts like intersectionality, bias, power, and privilege, and empower them to make healthy and healing choices for themselves. This curriculum will support their development as youth leaders and is rooted in social justice and anti-racist values. The curriculum is a 4-part series and will focus on self-esteem and awareness, relationships, values, impact, and empowerment, all through the lens of racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and is being developed through a collaborative design process with Mercy Housing youth and staff. And to support the sustainability and scalability of this work, we will also be implementing a Train the Trainer program and develop facilitation guides for Mercy Housing youth and staff to carry this work forward to other sites.
So with the youth being engaged in the space that they are, why do you feel like that is so important and vital to the sustainability and the scalability of it?
I think that centering the voices of youth in this process is crucial to really creating something that is made by them and for them, right? And so in order to really move the work forward, we have to engage the voices of the folks who will be experiencing and benefiting from it. And then we'll also then be the light that's carrying this work forward in future generations. And so I think it's crucial to include, this work is about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so this is a way that we are operationalizing inclusion, so to speak, into this process to make sure that, this work is being informed by youth who will be directly impacted by it.
And if I may, Jennifer, just piggyback a little bit on that. I think Nadia and I both come from backgrounds of working with young people, specifically with youth of color. And so this dedication and value that young people have so much to offer. We have so much to learn from them, and developmentally where they are in their identity formation, their meaning making, they have the ability to cut through a lot of BS, to name things as it is. And that gets watered down with time of being, socially informed, and the consequences that come with being outspoken, even, to be diplomatic, especially with these more charged conversations, they can cut right through it. A lot of the movements that we're seeing now are led from our young folks, queer folks, youth of color, and they can seem fearless, and I know they're carrying a lot of fear too, but they're brave. And so Nadia and I know that we need to have them at the table to inform our work, to guide us and direct us, and to call us in when we miss the mark. to keep us also, I was going to say keep us cool. I don't know if they can do that, but to keep us in the loop of like what is most relevant to them. And as my sister was sharing, that folks closest to the issue are closest to the solutions. And in this case, our young people will really be benefiting, but we as a community will benefit from their wisdom and having a sense of responsibility too, that we're doing the best that we can as allies. We're doing constantly, hopefully, building upon what was given to us as a responsibility and to make this world better. And now it's our work to hand that to our young people and to have that humility of what world are we leaving them right now? It's easy to lose some hope, and our young people can feel that. So trying to do the best that we can in the future generations, in the next 7 generations, with this work.
Thank you. I really love that. And the idea of leaving hope or giving hope away to someone else, like how much hope can we give away today? I'm curious in the times that seems kind of overrun with our current challenges, right? Aside from just living, we also are currently dealing with COVID, and we are really trying to impact racial injustices that have been going on for centuries, but we're focused on now, and then the economic challenges that we face. It can feel overwhelming to take on such an important issue at this time. I wonder what gives you hope and inspires you to continue championing this work every single day.
In my previous experiences in working with youth and now having my own middle schooler, you realize how critical that time period of adolescence is in a person's life, intellectually, emotionally, physically. And there's also an openness and genuine curiosity in youth that is truly inspiring to continue championing this work. And I just hope that all of our future generations can confidently step into their own identities with less barriers for every generation to come.
That was so beautiful. I would echo the same piece. The young people keep me inspired. Youth inspires me. Again, in the movements and their leadership and their naming of critical issues, their claiming of identities right now. I don't know if this is something that's more anecdotal or broader, but it took me a long time to be able to claim who I was, especially culturally, and embody what that meant to me, specifically for generations that have immigration experience where things have been lost along the way. And that inspires me to reclaim, remember what those are, and see our young people carry that at an earlier age each time. That puts my motivation in the work. And I feel like there's this reciprocal healing that happens for those ancestors that we've lost, that fought to keep those identities, fought to keep some traditions, the language, the stories, and to see that being reclaimed in our future generations is also healing.
Thank you both. Those were very inspiring to me because I also have a middle schooler who keeps it real for me and inspires me to continue on each day. I wonder, what do you think is an important first step to take when we think about building a more racially equitable society? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
For me, that looks like kindness and empathy and the ability to create spaces that are healing, holistic, and human first. And having the ability to recognize our own biases, power, and privilege as individuals and in systems is key to moving this work forward.
Nadia, time and time again, reminds me the power of the heart, of the love and empathy. Thank you, Nadia. I think specifically for racial equity, we've got to talk about race everywhere, in every system, in every institution, and any healing modality. Race needs to be acknowledged at the forefront and really taken beyond consideration, but a pinpoint of how are we engaging in this work. Equally for exploring our own racial biography, whatever that is for you individually, having the humility to take inventory of what do I need to reconcile? What parts of my identity racially make me uncomfortable and why? where do I hold those privileges? Where have I felt that discrimination or oppression? And to do the work on an individual basis. And sometimes that requires like just Google something rather than putting burdens on people of color to explain, especially for white folks, like really reconciling with some shadow work of our ancestors, right? There's like some stuff there that we're like, oh, and shame and guilt can really get us stuck. So I just cannot emphasize enough the importance of doing that individual, humble work so that then we can work collaboratively, collectively, and disrupt these very systems that were built upon oppressing folks based on our racial location.
I was just going to piggyback off of what you just said, Maya Sol. I think the other piece that I always try to remind myself is that this work takes time and it's going to be generational, and that we have to be patient and know that, you know, we are all growing, and having a growth mindset is so crucial to this work, and a positive mindset instead of a deficit mindset, and just making sure that it's continual, and that hope of like our younger generations carrying it on into the next generation and making it better and better and better moving forward. So the reminder that the work takes time.
Those are all great reminders and excellent ways to kind of start processing through this very heavy work. This, as you say, is like generational. It's such a journey. I wonder what you both do to kind of chill and relax, right? Like, oh my goodness, so today was a rough day, or today was an amazing day, but I still need to chill. How do you do that?
Yeah, I love to cook and bake with my family, with my husband and my kids. I also have a food blog because I love to cook and bake so much. I love to share my journey and my exploration in cooking through photography and story. Just spending time with family and friends, exploring new places, being outside, you know, doing movie nights with my kiddos, and building community wherever I am.
And I love that this is part of the accountability that we hold each other to. Like, what do you do? And show me. And Nadia does a beautiful job of taking pictures, by the way, of what she cooks and bakes. It's out of this world. I deeply believe and trust in cultura cura, which translates to culture cures or culture heals. And so coming time and time again back to community, back to my aunties, my comadres, much of what I come at in any space with has been informed by a council of women. My mama, my aunties, my comadre. And so coming back and almost seeking counsel of what do I need? How do you see me? Taking inventory, it provides me a level of soul care that keeps me going. And then the light-sided part of that is that I really enjoy art, creating things with my hands, dancing, singing. I taught myself to play the guitar in the time of quarantine. It's not good, but I jam on my own, which feels really nice. And again, it's just celebrating the moments that I can and finding joy in this work. I do think that there's a reciprocal process that happens when we create change. I feel this like almost like a charging of my tank of, a healing came back to me. Every time that I see an aha or a young person feel empowered, it's like there's this reciprocity where people might say like, you're working so much. Yes, and there is an exchange that takes place in this work for me. It's not directly transactional of just me being efficient or productive. I'm also gaining a lot of healing from the work that we do.
That is awesome. And Nadia, when we're done with the quarantine, we're going to be talking about baking, okay? As you both mentioned, this is very individual work, right? Very personal work. What is one thing you hope that people will take away from today, from the conversation that we've had?
I think if there's one takeaway that I would love folks to go with today is that this work takes time and will always be there in some way, shape, or form, whether it's around reducing disparities or creating healing spaces for folks. Truly listening and engaging in our communities is how racial justice work will keep moving forward.
One of the takeaways, and I think I might have even started with this, is that the folks often closest to the issue are closest to the solution. So please listen to your communities, listen to people of color, listen to Indigenous folks, listen to our young folks. there's wisdom there, even when it's inconvenient, and especially when the timing is critical. I mean, we have a sense of urgency of what's going on right now, and so ears open, eyes up, let's go. And I trust very much in the philosophy of todo va a estar bien, everything will be okay, but we have work to do. There's a lot of work to do, and hopefully by keeping us well and centered and naming things like mental health as a real part of this work, and building practices, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, to sustain us, are going to be part of that journey. Todo va a estar bien. Everything is going to be okay. But let's get to work.
I love it, and have thoroughly enjoyed talking with both of you today. I get to work with you a little bit more, so we will be doing some more work around racial equity, diversity, and inclusion here together at Mercy Housing. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks.